첫 주인에게 버림받던 날, 난 그리 슬프지 않았어. 버려질 수밖에 없는 나는 플라스틱 페트병이었으니까. 난 사랑받을 운명이 아니었어. 어쩌다 운 좋게 재활용 원단이 될 기회를 얻었지만 다 헛된 희망이었지. 선택받지 못해 또다시 창고에 버려졌거든. 그렇게 체념한 채 소각장의 갈라를 기다리는데 말이야, 이상하게 이런 마음이 생기더라. 누군가의 옷이 되어 사랑받는 기분, 한 번쯤 꼭 느껴보고 싶다고. 이런 날 네가 구원해줬지만 가끔은 불안한 마음이 들어. 유행이 지났다는 이유로 다시 버려지게 될지 모르니까. 너에게 부탁 하나 해도 될까? 너와의 행복이 계속될 수 있도록 나를 오래오래 입어줘. 지구를 사랑하는 당신에게, 당신을 사랑하는 옷으로부터. 리 텍스타일 by WWF.
Take my hand as we go together down tomorrow. Take on the world for a better change. So hold my hand here today. As we just hold my hand here today.
응원해요. 당신의 작은 실천. 내가 아끼는 집, 나를 아끼는 집. 이케아.
우리는 왜 행복할까요? 다 마신 페트병을 다시 깨끗하게 만들어 재탄생시키기 때문이죠. 제품의 생산, 유통, 판매, 회수까지. 제주개발공사와 함께 우리의 지구를 지켜요.
Attendez, monsieur le réalisateur, j'ai un plus beau profil gauche. Pouvez-vous vous tourner un peu vers la gauche? Oui, 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 c'est bon maintenant. Merci. 1, 2, 1, 2,
สวัสดีค่ะ ฉันคือต้นหนวดปลาหมึก มาจากประเทศไทยค่ะ
Meu nome é Lírio da Paz, Congo, e eu vim da Amazônia.
Je suis Areka Palm et je vis dans une école primaire avec les enfants. Je suis de Madagascar.
ป่ามีความจำเป็นต่อโลก แต่ว่าพื้นที่สำหรับปลูกป่าค่อยๆลดลงไปเรื่อยๆ จึงทำให้พื้นที่เมืองค่อยๆมากขึ้น ถ้าพื้นที่ปลูกต้นไม้ขาดแคลน เลยมีความคิดว่าพื้นที่ในร่มก็น่าจะสามารถทำเป็นป่าได้หรือไม่ ค คงจะดีกว่าที่อื่นถ้าหากห้องเรียนของเด็กๆสามารถกลายเป็นป่าได้มันเยี่ยมยอดจริงๆที่ทั้งหมดมาอยู่ที่ตรงนี้แล้ว
Na hora de ir para a escola, de manhã, dá para escutar os passos das crianças de longe. As crianças são bem fofas quando entram e me perguntam: dormiu bem? Vai tomar água hoje? Desse jeito. Mesmo que ninguém diga nada, eles já sabem como se comunicar com a natureza.
Les enseignants disent à chaque cours de sport aux enfants: les enfants, l'air est chargé en particules fines aujourd'hui. Ce n'est pas une bonne journée pour respirer dehors. Les enfants doivent grandir en jouant à l'extérieur. Les particules fines s'aggravent au printemps, en début de semestre. Oh, pendant plus de la moitié des mois de printemps, alors que les fleurs fleurissent, les activités de plein air sont interdites.
Quando eu procurei na internet, eu achei muitos comentários interessantes. Um purificador de ar sem tomada. Nos dias com muitas partículas no ar, meus amigos são bem disputados.
เครื่องฟอกอากาศดูดแค่ละอองฝุ่นเข้าไปแต่ว่าที่ในห้องเรียนของพวกเรานั้นจับกินพวกสารประกอบอินทรีย์ระเหยง่ายอย่างฟอร์มาลดีไฮด์ทำการย่อยแล้วเปลี่ยนเป็นน้ำตาล
E o que eu mais gosto de comer é o formal.
Cette substance est surtout et tout particulièrement très dangereuse pour les enfants. 4 fois plus dangereuse que pour les adultes.
สงสัยกินฝุ่นเข้าไปมากขอโทษนะคะขอน้ำหน่อยค่ะดังนั้นฉันคิดว่างานที่ฉันทำเป็นสิ่งที่มีความหมายมากค่ะอากาศสะอาดที่ฉันเป็นคนทำฉันรู้ว่ามันแทรกซึมไปในชีวิตของเด็กๆค่ะแม้กระนั้นก็ตามมีสิ่งหนึ่งที่คนไม่ค่อยรู้ทุกครั้งที่ลูบใบของฉันทุกครั้งที่ใบไม้สั่นไหวส่องแสงกับแสงแดดได้กลิ่นดินในตัวฉันมองเห็นสีหน้าของเด็กๆที่ผ่อนคลายอย่างสนุกสนานปลอดภัยและนุ่มนวล
Para viver junto com as plantas, não basta a gente apenas decorar bem ou purificar o ar.
Vivre avec les plantes.
อยากให้รู้ไว้ว่าพวกเราสามารถทำชีวิตให้สุขภาพแข็งแรงและสวยงามได้ค่ะ
Muito mais bonito do que se poderia imaginar.
Comme le mot naturel. Étant donné que la vie proche de nous est dans la nature, nous nous sentirons à notre aise.
일단 포항은
들어갈 때마다 새롭고
지형들이 상당히 이뻐요.
무엇보다 환상적인 바닷속이 멋있어가지고
특히 해가 뜰 때 정말 예쁩니다.
부터 다이빙 시작하게 됐습니다.
17년 정도는 됐습니다. 뭐 숫자로 말할 수 없을 정도로 많이 했죠.
바다를 지키고자 하는 의무를 가지고
꾸준히 오랫동안 지속적으로 해야 되겠다.
우리 애들이 깨끗한 바다에서 논다는 그 기분도
바다를 즐기는 사람으로서
상당히 그 자부심이라든지
바다가 깨끗해진다는 그 느낌이 너무 좋습니다.
하도에 실려오는 쓰레기라든지
폐그물, 폐어망, 타이어도 있고요.
각종 플라스틱이 엄청나게 많이 모여 있습니다.
플라스틱이 뱃속에 들어가가지고 죽은 바다 생물들이 많습니다. 인간들이 무분별하게 버린 쓰레기들을 먹인 줄 알고 먹게 돼서
좀 안타까워요, 사실은. 버리기는 쉬운데 건지는 힘들어요.
바다에 들어가면 부식도 안 되고 썩지도 않으니까.
그럼 바다 생물을 보호하기 위해서 쓰레기들은 버리지 않았으면 좋겠습니다.
편리한 만큼 신경을 좀 써서 처리하는 그런 습관을 좀 가졌으면 좋겠습니다.
특히 일회용 플라스틱을 쉽게 쓰시지만 치우는 건 쉽지 않다 보니까 정말 사용하시면 안 될 것 같습니다.
제2차 P4G 정상회의를 서울에서 개최합니다. 국제사회와 함께 탄소 중립 실현에 앞장서겠습니다.
Welcome to the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit, and thank you for joining the Circular Economy session, themed Circular Economy Measures Towards a Zero Waste Society. If the conventional economic model was the linear economy, in which raw materials are collected and then transformed into mass products that are used and discarded as waste, the circular economy is a model that aims for sustainable growth by minimizing the use of resource inputs and regenerating waste materials as resources. And the circular economy is one of the 5 key roles of the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit, and is the 12th goal that the international society has agreed on to achieve sustainable future by 2030. So our session brings together stakeholders from public and, of course, private sectors to discuss circular economy measures to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 and shift into a zero-waste society. So here at the Dongdaemun Design Plaza, we're joined by delegates, experts who are here as speakers, as well as industry professionals and citizens as audiences, and also representatives from public and private sectors, international organizations, and academia will be joining us online. Moreover, at one section of the venue, various upcycled items are being displayed, and products and items that used to get discarded after use have now been given a new life as beautiful hanbok, which is the Korean traditional dress, and cool fashion accessories, as well as useful daily essentials. I think they will let us see and experience how the discussion today will take its tangible form in our daily lives. And at the end of the session, there will be a very interesting and special performance. All stories and ideas that was presented and discussed during the session are to turn into an amazing work of art. So please stay with us until the very end and to see what kind of work our session would inspire to be created. So ladies and gentlemen, now let's begin the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit's Circular Economy Session. Presentations and discussions will take place in a hybrid format where delegates attend either in person or online, and insight and inspiration that every participant brings to the table will contribute to the meaningful outcome of the session. So first of all, please join me in welcoming Environment Minister Han Jong-ae of Republic of Korea. Please welcome him.
안녕하십니까. 대한민국 환경부 장관 한정혜입니다. 먼저 P4G 서울 정상회의 순환경제 세션에 참석해 주신 레아 베르멜린 덴마크 환경부 장관님, 롤프 바옙 바젤 로테르담 스톡홀름 협약 사무총장님, 그리고 패널 분들과 순환경제 활성화를 위해서 함께 뛰고 있는 전 세계 모든 분들께 감사드립니다. 그동안 우리 인류는 경제 성장이라고 하는 먹고 사는 문제를 먼저 해결하고 또 우리 삶의 편리함을 추구하고자 기후변화라고 하는 전 지구가 직면한 문제를 외면해 왔습니다. 이러한 안일함이 기후위기를 가중시키고 있죠. 이제 우리에게 탄소 중립은 선택이 아닌 생존을 위한 선결과제가 되었습니다. 지금 우리가 맞닥뜨린 기후위기는 산업화 시대의 유산인 선형경제 구조에서 출발했습니다. 선형경제는 자원과 에너지를 최대로 투입해서 대량 생산은 가능하게 만들었습니다. 하지만 이것은 오로지 앞만 보고 달리는 100m 달리기와 같습니다. 빠른 속도로 나아갈 수는 있습니다만 금세 주저앉고 말기 때문입니다. 오늘날에 우리는 이제 장거리 경주를 해야 합니다. 우리는 물론 우리의 자녀, 우리의 후손들이 살아갈 소중한 삶의 터전과 환경을 지키기 위해서 탄소 중립이라고 하는 배턴을 넘겨받으며 이어달리는 아주 긴 경주가 되겠죠. 세대를 뛰어넘는 긴 경주를 지속 가능하게 만드는 것, 바로 순환경제입니다. 모든 단계에서 자원 낭비를 최소화함은 물론 한 번 사용한 자원을 버리는 것이 아니라 다시 생산에 투입하는 지속 가능한 경제 모델을 구축해야 합니다. 지금 세계는 기후위기에 대응하기 위해서 순환경제 활성화 노력을 적극 이어가고 있습니다. 지난해 유럽은 경제성장과 자원 소비의 탈동조화를 목표로 한 신순환경제 행동계획을 발표한 바 있습니다. 순환경제를 기후변화 대응뿐 아니라 산업의 경쟁력을 높이는 핵심 전략으로 삼았고 산업 전반에 걸쳐서 자원순환성을 높여가고 있는 것이죠. 대한민국도 함께 노력하고 있습니다. 자원순환 사회로의 전환을 위해서 2018년 자원순환에 관한 기본법을 제정하였고 이에 기반한 자원순환 기본계획을 수립하여 추진 중에 있습니다. 지난해 12월 한국 정부는 2050년 탄소중립 이행을 약속하고 이를 위한 10대 핵심 과제 중에 하나로 순환경제 활성화를 제시했습니다. 우리에게는 그동안의 성과도 있었지만 여전히 해결해야 할 숙제가 많습니다. 저는 이 자리에서 순환경제가 대한민국의 경제, 사회 전반에 스며들 수 있도록 몇 가지 약속을 하고자 합니다. 우선 2021년을 순환경제 전환을 위한 원년으로 삼아 이를 위한 법적 기반을 마련하고 한국형 순환경제 실천 전략을 수립하여 추진해 나가겠습니다. 둘째, 그간 버려져서 소각되거나 매립되어 온 폐기물이 원료로 또 자원으로 다시 태어날 수 있도록 순환경제 선도 모델을 발굴, 지원해서 산업 전반으로 순환고리를 이어가도록 하겠습니다. 셋째, 우리의 일상 속에서 누구나가 다 순환경제의 주인공이 될 수 있도록 라벨 없는 생수병, 일회용품 없는 커피 전문점 등 불필요한 일회용품과 포장재 사용을 줄이는 생활 속의 실천 기반을 확대해 나가도록 하겠습니다. 마지막으로 전 지구적인 순환경제 노력에 동참하고자 합니다. 대한민국은 유럽연합 등이 주축이 되어서 지난 2월에 출범시킨 순환경제와 자원 효율성을 위한 국제동맹에 가입하여 공정한 순환경제로의 전환을 위한 국제협력에 함께 이바지하도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 P4G 서울 정상회의 순환경제 세션에 국제기구, 정부, 기업, 전문가와 시민이 하나의 목표를 위해서 모였습니다. 지속가능한 자원의 사용으로 폐기물이 없는 사회로 한 걸음 더 나아가기 위한 스마트하고 손에 잡히는 순환경제 전략이 도출되기를 기대해 봅니다. 저는 이 자리에서 다시 한번 대한민국의 순환경제 실천 의지와 지속적인 노력을 약속드립니다. 독주가 아닌 협주로, 경쟁이 아닌 협력으로 순환경제 시대의 조율자로서 대한민국이 함께 하겠습니다. 순환경제 모델이 가치사슬 전반에 뿌리 내릴 수 있도록 함께 힘을 모읍시다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Minister. Your words clearly reflected Korea's vision and also commitment to the circular economy. Thank you very much. And now it's time to invite our keynote speaker. Denmark is one of the most environmentally friendly countries in the world. And today we're going to meet Minister Lea Wermelin, Denmark's Minister for the Environment.
Thank you. Dear ministers, dear excellencies, dear speakers, dear participants from the P4G family and from other countries on our beautiful planet. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the potentials of a circular economy at this P4G session. And thank you for your commitment to this important agenda. As humans, we have spent centuries refining a certain skill set, that of extracting the resources of our planet. Over time, we have developed new methods, each one more effective than the last. From the aqueducts of ancient times to the offshore pipelines of today, from using picks and shovels to unearth minerals to now deploying enormous drills and bulldozers. Make no mistake, our ability to harvest metal, food, and fuels have helped us thrive. It has lifted millions out of poverty and sparked innovation around the globe. And today's conference, where we meet across continents, wouldn't be possible without copper wire in our laptops or LCD glass in our screens. But while our use of natural resources has indeed become effective, it has yet to become efficient. We all share this one planet, but by 2050, we will be consuming as if we had three. And we will be generating around 70% more waste per year than we do today. This cannot go on. We need to ease the pressure on our climate and biodiversity. We need to speed up the transition to a circular economy, and we need to work together to build back a greener world in the wake of the current pandemic. Making a successful transition to a circular economy is in many ways like solving a jigsaw puzzle. only that the puzzle would never fit at a dinner table, as it is the size of our planet, and that the pieces aren't small bits of cardboard, but instead every resource in the global economy. Plastic bottles and paper bags, window frames and kitchen tiles, steel beams and smartphone chargers. It is a puzzle so large, so intricate, that in order to solve it, we need everyone to contribute: governments, businesses, civil society. Furthermore, we need to solve it quickly, because right now, too many pieces are discarded or lost forever. Some are buried in landfills or burned in furnaces. Others find their way into oceans or nature, hurting animals and our environment. Here, a multilateral venue as P4G is crucial to piecing together the puzzle by bringing together countries and companies from all around the world, from Asia to the Americas, and from Southern Africa to Northern Europe. I believe we can find the solutions we need. In Denmark, we want to be at the global forefront when it comes to climate action. We want to reduce our impact while creating jobs and reaping the benefits of green technology. Therefore, less than a year ago, we set an ambitious goal to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 70% in 2030. To achieve this, all sectors have to contribute. Transport, industry, construction, agriculture, just to name a few. Here, collaboration between the private and public sector is key. Therefore, we started the process by creating climate partnerships. Partnerships where leading Danish companies and organizations gave us their recommendations on how we can reduce emissions to each sector. Needless to say, many recommendations were linked to a more circular economy. In Denmark, we have been working with circular economy for the past 15 years. And while we are still in the early phases, we have already succeeded in lessening our impact, creating jobs, and driving up exports across a number of sectors. One example is our water sector. Many of our wastewater plants are now so effective at turning sewage into biogas that they have in fact become net energy producers. The sector is increasingly contributing to the circular economy, not only by energy and heat production, but also by making sure that nutrients and other resources are recovered. And today, Danish companies are helping states and countries all over the world to achieve a more efficient and sustainable water sector. In other areas, we still have work to do. One of them is our waste sector. In Denmark, we produce more household waste per citizen than any other OECD country. Instead of holding a record in producing waste, we want to lead the way when it comes to preventing the loss of natural resources. Therefore, we have made a new national plan for waste management and prevention, with the goal of a climate-neutral waste sector in 2030. Right now, we are therefore streamlining the way we sort our waste on a national scale, so that no matter where in Denmark you live or go to work, all household waste is sorted in the same way. This will not only make sorting and recycling easier for our citizens, it will also improve the quality of the waste streams, making it more attractive for companies to invest in new recycling technologies. We believe a strong focus on circularity will not only benefit the climate and environment, it will also benefit businesses. And why is that? Well, there are a number of reasons. Let me just point out a few here today. First of all, as the threat from climate change grows, so does the will to do something about it. Just within the last few years, large and small economies alike have set forth new ambitious climate goals that was unthinkable just 5 years ago. Meeting these goals is simply not possible without adopting a more circular economy. To achieve net zero, we need to achieve a zero waste society. And already we see new legislation and new strategies aimed at speeding up the transition. For instance, the EU has in record time adopted measures to tackle single-use plastic. meaning that the range of plastic products where sustainable alternatives are easily available, like plastic cups, food containers, and wet wipes, will be banned this summer. We need to create incentives for companies to design smarter, using fewer resources and making sure that their products can be repaired, reused, and recycled. Here we look especially forward to the upcoming proposal from the EU Commission on a sustainable product initiative. It should combine minimum requirements on products to access the internal market with incentives to push for still more innovative and green products, and also provide reliable and trustworthy information to consumers on green claims. This type of regulation means businesses will have to adopt, but it doesn't mean that it will be bad for business. In the EU, for instance, manufacturing firms spend up to about 40% on materials on average. Here, a more circular economy with closed loops can increase profitability and shield companies from price fluctuations as the ones we see right now, where prices on commodities like copper have reached all-time highs. Last but not least, the circular economy can spark innovation, leading to growth and new jobs. In the EU alone, transitioning to a more circular economy has the potential to create 700,000 new jobs. Just imagine how many jobs could be created on a global scale. So, to me, there really isn't an alternative, and we need to help each other across continents, countries, and companies to promote circularity. Here, this summit will be important, not only to strengthen the green impact of P4G, but also to serve as a stepping stone to COP26, where we need to put special emphasis on the importance of public-private partnerships. Together, I believe we can solve the puzzle of circularity and steer the world into a greener and more sustainable path, benefiting both the climate, biodiversity, and businesses. Thank you all for listening. I wish you a fruitful session and an inspiring summit.
Thank you, Minister. Denmark's efforts towards circular economy reflected on their policies is very inspiring. Thank you once again. Now we will hear from our next keynote speaker. The Basel Convention is an international treaty that was designed to reduce the movement of hazardous waste between nations. The treaty that first came into force in 1992 were amended and came into effect in January 2021 with the objective of enhancing the control of transboundary movements of plastic waste. Let us invite Mr. Rolf Pyatt, Executive Secretary for the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, to hear about how these changes will affect the global circular economy system.
Distinguished Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to take part in this session of the P4G Summit and contribute to this reflection on a vision for circular economy. The current take-make-waste extractive industrial model is not only environmentally unsustainable, but it is also a missed economic and social opportunity. We've been surrounded with potential environmental threats that illustrate the challenge for our societies in decoupling economic activity from the consumption of finite resources. World Bank statistics, for example, forecast that the global waste production will grow to 3.4 billion tons by 2050, more than double the population growth over the same period. In 2019, people worldwide discarded most of the estimated 54 million metric tons of electrical and electronic products, mostly end-of-life kitchen, laundry, and bathroom equipment, like microwave ovens, washing machines, and dishwashers. This is comparable to the 1.15 million 40-ton 18-wheel trucks, enough to form a line of trucks 23,000 kilometers long. And that's more than the distance between Seoul and the South Pole. Again, these statistics is a sobering reality that less than 1/6 of last year's e-waste is thought to have been diverted for proper recycling and reuse. Should this trend continue, the future paints a bleak future. Through a circular economy, we can reduce environmental impacts while achieving large economic benefits. Working electronic goods and components, for example, are worth more than the materials they contain. They should be designed to have an extended lifespan and also be able to be recycled cost effectively and also energy efficiently. Once achieved, the extended lifespan of the product and its parts, e-waste recycling has been proven to be economically viable and attractive, providing economic opportunities such as labor for the circular economy. The collection, segregation, and primary dismantling of non-hazardous fractions of electronic waste can also be organized with relatively cheap, simple, but safe processing methods. The raw material value in electronic waste alone is estimated in 2019 to be worth than $57 billion. That is equivalent to 76 billion South Korean yuans, 3 times more than the annual output of the world's silver mines and more than the gross domestic product of most countries of the world. There is 100 times more gold in a ton of mobile phones than in a ton of gold ore. Furthermore, recycling the resources and reusing the resources and recovering the resources from used electronics produce substantially less carbon dioxide emissions than mining from the Earth's crust. If the sector is supported with the right policy mix and managed in the right way, it has the potential to create millions of decent jobs worldwide without harming human environment and the human health. E-waste is not only a post-consumer problem. Designers, manufacturers, investors, traders, miners, raw material producers, consumers, policymakers, and others have a crucial role to play in reducing waste, retaining value within the system, extending the economic and physical life of an item, as well as its ability to be repaired, recycled, and reused. Taking a systems approach and redesigning the entire electronic device life cycle for a circular economy could also create more value in the system. Although good work has been happening, this sector has the potential to generate socioeconomic and environmental benefits. Many challenges still remain, including major environmental and health impacts resulting from dismantling, material recovery, and final disposal of the electronic product. For instance, cable burning is a major source of dioxin emissions, especially in poorer countries where no facilities for sound environmental recycling of e-waste is available. Besides, current recycling practices focus on the recovery of steel, gold, aluminum, and copper are quite inefficient when compared to extraction of other metals. The Basel Convention has contributed to increased circularity in the electronics sector by developing technical guidance for environmentally sound management and the transboundary movement of e-waste. The convention has also provided a multi-stakeholder platform for sharing best practices, guidance documents, and policy experience with the follow-up partnership to PACE, which is the Partnership for Action on Computing Equipment. Plastics is yet another example of a major source of pollution and missed economic opportunity. You may already have heard that if we continue following the same trend, there may be more plastic than fish in the oceans by 2050. According to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, after a first short use cycle, 95% of plastic packaging material value, or US 80 to 120 billion annually, is lost to the economy. The Basel Convention's plastic waste amendments adopted in 2019, which made the Basel Convention the only globally and legally binding instrument that currently and specifically addresses plastic waste, has helped to advance circularity by creating the conditions for the global trade in plastic waste and also to become more transparent and better regulated, as well as inciting governments to provide incentives to strengthen national capacities and infrastructure for the environmentally sound management of plastic waste, and thus encouraging innovation towards the prevention and minimization of plastic waste. Finally, to assist parties in implementing their obligations, the Plastic Waste Partnership under the Basel Convention was also established. Following the waste hierarchy and a life cycle approach, project groups of the Plastic Waste Partnership addressed, among others, prevention and minimization, as well as recycling and financing. To facilitate concrete results on the ground, with funding from Germany, Norway, and Switzerland, 23 pilot projects will be implemented, cutting across these themes. Pollution has a negative environmental and economic impacts. And according to the Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health, pollution is the largest environmental cause of disease and premature death in the world today. Diseases caused by pollution were responsible for an estimated 9 million premature deaths in 2015. This is 16% of all deaths worldwide. Existing knowledge of pollution impacts on the environment and people points to the need to urgently prioritize action to tackle pollution, a planetary crisis which adversely impacts the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. COVID-19 has further illustrated this need, as studies suggest that the impacts of air pollution, combined with the impacts of COVID-19, can lead to the worst health and planetary outcomes. Furthermore, the pandemic has also brought along additional challenges, such as the exponential growth in the production of medical waste due to the wide use of personal protective equipment, or PPE, and the increased use of single-use plastics. In general, there has always been a strong culture of single-use disposable medical devices, with consequences such as environmental and public health-related issues, supply chain vulnerability, and increased healthcare expenditures. This is backed by a wrong perception that single-use is cheap and more healthy, but reuse can be cheaper. Manufacturers have a strong influence on obsolescence to force consumption. Circularity requires cooperation of diverse stakeholders, and it is not a widespread concept as yet. For instance, recycling may be an alternative for low complexity devices such as syringes and needles. Reuse of non-sterile clinical equipment while keeping product integrity is an option for high complexity devices. There's also the option to shift from products to services, but more studies are needed to assess these other potential opportunities. Policies, regulations, and incentives need to be in place to allow for change and compliance. For example, with the availability of standards to follow, protocols and procurement rules linked to product design, as well as safety measures for reuse, are important. Innovation is also needed. For example, with the development of more sustainable materials and solutions, we can lead to more robust products and less obsolescence, but also much easily recyclable products. The achievement of the sustainable management of chemicals and waste is key to a circular economy and is among the objectives of the sustainable development set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. SDG 12.4 sets out to achieve by 2030 the environmentally sound management of chemicals and all waste throughout their life cycle, in accordance with agreed international framework, and significantly reduce their release to air, water, and soil in order to minimize the adverse impacts on human health and environment. The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions are milestones in the environmentally sound management of chemicals and waste. They share the common objective to protect human health and the environment from the adverse effects of chemicals and waste, and provide a framework for the life cycle management of chemicals. Together, they cover the elements of the cradle-to-grave approach. For example, most of all the persistent organic pollutants covered under the Stockholm Convention are also subject to the Basel and Rotterdam Conventions. all wastes, all chemicals listed under the Stockholm and Rotterdam Conventions also fall under the scope of the Basel Convention. Waste prevention, minimization, and the environmentally sound management of hazardous and other wastes are legally binding under the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, and are key to a vision for circular economy. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies and ministers, with these few words, I thank you for your attention.
And we've prepared a sub-session within the main session as well. So now we will move on to a session organized by the P4G Hub. This discussion will showcase tangible examples of circular economy partnerships and how P4G and its ecosystem is helping scale these models of change. So Mr. Kevin Mose will take over from this point on. Mr. Kevin Mose, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Sung Hee, and welcome everybody to the P4G session on circular economy. I'm Kevin Moss, Global Director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the World Resources Institute, and I also oversee WRI's hosting of PACE, the platform for accelerating circular economy, so I'm especially pleased to be here today moderating this session. Research shows us that the circular economy offers a $4.5 trillion economic opportunity, and we need it if we're to stay within planetary boundaries. Yet the global economy is only a little over 8% circular, which means over 90% of the materials we use go to waste after only one life. Today we'll be discussing solutions to this challenge and opportunity. What are the most promising opportunities, and what role can you and P4G play to ensure circular economy becomes core to our economic activities? We're going to kick off with a brief video that shares an overview of P4G's work in this space.
Only 8.4% of the materials we extract are reused, and resource use could double by 2050. This is why deep collaboration through cross-cutting initiatives like PACE and P4G are absolutely critical.
P4G's Zero Waste Green Industry theme accelerates partnerships that approach waste as an investable asset to generate green growth. The SSEZ Sustainable Industrial Clusters Partnership is creating a blueprint for sustainable industrialization in Africa by transforming industrial parks into green manufacturing hubs that attract $500 million in investment and create 10,000 jobs. The Circular Fashion Partnership reintegrates over 70 tons of waste from garment production in Bangladesh back into the supply chain to increase use of recycled materials in new fashion products. The Cyclist Partnership is providing Indonesian consumers and retailers with refilling solutions that are expected to prevent 200 million plastic sachets from entering the oceans in 2 years.
P4G is making the circular transition a reality by working with the World Economic Forum and the Mission Possible Partnership to decarbonize industry across sectors. These innovative and scalable models improve the resilience of climate-vulnerable nations and embody the spirit of an inclusive, net-zero future.
P4G is a global platform delivering transformative impact with a pipeline of more than 50 partnerships and a global ecosystem spanning 12 country partners, 5 organizational partners, and more than 240 business and civil society partners. Join us in pioneering green partnerships and investing in impact.
Okay, so with no further ado, let me introduce our keynote speakers who are going to help us kick off our event today. Dr. Julius Moya, who is Principal Secretary, Kenya National Treasury and Planning. Minister Suharto Monoarfa, Indonesian Minister for National Development Planning, and Farouk Hassan, President of the Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association. Farouk, we're going to start with you. Tell us please about the importance of engaging local manufacturers in circular economy solutions and Bangladesh's rising prominence in this sector.
Distinguished panelists and audience, a very good afternoon to you all. On behalf of the BGMA, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to the P4G Summit. Distinguished presence, Bangladesh is the second largest apparel exporting country in the world, and our economy is heavily dependent on this industry. 84% of our overall export earnings are generated from this particular sector. It employs around 4 million workers, mainly women from rural areas. We are facing difficult times due to the COVID pandemic. Around $3 billion worth of orders were either cancelled or put on hold. Around 15 fashion brands sourcing from us sought bankruptcy protection, which created a huge pressure on the manufacturer, coupled with the impact of discount and declining demand. Thanks to the timely stimulus provided by the government of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the livelihood of our workers were safe. But we are still striving to build back better. The global fashion industry historically follows the linear model of business, that is take, make, dispose. But we cannot afford to continue on this linear model. Circular economy can build a pathway for greater environmental sustainability coupled with economic growth. It is what we call closing the loop. Bangladesh is one of the largest producers of the textile scraps in the world. Around 400,000 tons of pre-consumer textile waste are produced annually, of which only 5% is being recycled locally. Instead, through the partnership with P4G, we are working to build a circular model in Bangladesh by developing domestic recycling facilities, technologies, and expertise. We appreciate the collaboration of P4G in the circular fashion partnership being implemented by the Global Fashion Agenda, BGME, and Reverse Resources. The partnership is mobilizing over 140 global brand factories and recyclers to increase the use of recycled fibers in textile. This particular project created the stepping stone for the Bangladesh orange industry towards the journey of closing the loop. The culture and customs in Bangladesh are far different from our main market, the EU or the US. So it is very important for us to develop a customized local ecosystem of circularity. We look forward to take forward the circular fashion partnership in the future to a localized platform and develop the capacity of manufacturers, recyclers, and waste handlers to domestically close the loop. We are also looking forward to post-consumer waste recycling, and we need strong collaboration from the P4G and Apple brand to do so. Sustainability is one of the core areas of concern for BGME. We have already made some great strides forward. For example, Bangladesh has the highest number of LEED certified green factories in the world. We have signed the UNFCCC Fashion Industry Charter for Climate Action. Recently, 47 BGME members factories published SDGs report partnering UNDP and Bangladesh government. So altogether, a positive momentum has been created. Dear President, we are enthusiastic about circular economy, but we have reservation. One of the principles of our circular economy is keeping product and material in use, but the RMG industry in countries like ours flourish based on the past fashion culture. Therefore, while we are moving towards the circular economy, we have to be very cautious about the economy impact. Especially manufacturers, we may study how we can offset the negative impact through a market-based solution. While we move towards a circular economy, the skill and efficiencies of our industries have to continue to improve in order to be competitive in the global marketplace. Thank you.
Farouk, thank you so much. We're going to move on now to Dr. Moya. Dr. Moya, it's great to see you. We've met so many times through P4G. Please tell us, how are you building momentum in a circular economy in Kenya? And how can P4G help scale that vision?
Through our long-term development plan called the Kenya Vision 2030 and the Priority Big Four Agenda, Kenya has committed her future to developing an economy that is anchored on sustainable industry. Under this long-term vision, the government of Kenya is strongly committed to becoming a global leader in the international movement towards sustainable industry and green manufacturing, with the private sector as a key driver of change. We appreciate that the P4G partnership brings a new form of green and sustainable manufacturing cases for Kenya and Africa's sustainable industrialization by building a new way of industry that is profitable, that is sustainable, and that is scalable. This new approach also creates a safe landing spot and also supportive logistics for manufacturers and investors. To attain the P4G objectives, it is imperative that governments, businesses, and investors work together to get sustainable industrial clusters off the ground and make clusters feasible and profitable. In this regard, Kenya is keen on cementing its leadership in this area through successful scaling solutions in green manufacturing, which are based on the demonstrated P4G model. In addition, Kenya is fully committed to continue creating an enabling environment that fosters complementarity and the collaboration between policymakers and investors, and also that supports private sector engagement. Through the proven P4G model roadmap of implementation, it is expected that these industrial clusters will prove essential in helping Kenya achieve our climate ambitions while driving forward economic growth. We recognize that P4G plays a unique role, not only in accelerating partnerships like sustainable industrial clusters in countries like Kenya, but also bridging the gap between national development and investment agendas by mobilizing an ecosystem of governments, innovators, businesses, and resources for sustainable and inclusive change. In conclusion, I submit that in order to achieve transformative impact at speed and scale, we need to co-invest in global delivery mechanisms like P4G and its innovative partnerships. I thank you.
Dr. Moya, thank you so much. And I know how much more rich content there is from Kenya as you work on environmental issues and circular economy to grow the economy at the same time. And with more time, there would be so much more many more insights you could share with us. I'm going to move on from Kenya though, and I'm going to move now to you, Minister Monoafa. Please tell us a little bit about how you are building momentum towards a circular economy in Indonesia and how P4G can help you scale that vision.
I do congratulate to the Ministry of Environment Republic of Korea and P4G for the success of conducting this circular economy thematic breakout session at the P4G Seoul Summit, partnering for green growth and global goals 2030 amid the challenging situation we face now. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, currently we are facing two major crises that threaten the safety of human life: the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis. For this reason, we recognize the need for policy planning that is adaptive to the dynamic of change and also sustainable for the environment, economy, and society. The business as usual approach is considered no longer able to answer the challenges of economic and environmental problems simultaneously. In response to those issues, Indonesia's government has continuously stepped up its commitment to cope with the climate change and to achieve sustainable development goals by ensuring that environmental sustainability is embodied in our national development planning and our long-term vision. Circular economy has been adopted in Indonesia Vision 2045, and last year, Indonesia launched its first Green National Medium-Term Development Plan, RPJMN 22 to 2024. The plan incorporates low carbon and climate resilience development as a national priority, while also integrates circular economy strategy under two national priorities. To better implement the circular economy agenda and to revive the economy with a more sustainable strategy, we propose three main strategies. First, development of sustainable investment financing that enables private and non-government organizations to partner with government in supporting low-carbon development, especially in our priority areas such as renewable energy, sustainable land restoration, green industry development, blue energy, waste management, and circular economy. Second, building knowledge on green technology, as we need practical solutions that support the government adoption and deployment of green technology innovation. And third, enhancing Indonesia's circular economy strategy by developing a detailed circular economy action plan and roadmaps, as well as development of partnership platform to implement a circular economy strategy. Challenges and opportunities certainly exist in implementing this circular economy. However, we are optimistic that with the collaboration of all stakeholders, economic transformation through low carbon development and circular economy can be a long-term solution for Indonesia. I would like to express my appreciation to the government of the Republic of Korea, honorable speakers, committees, and all participants for your warm and continuing support for effective participation in sustainable development and climate action. I do hope today's forum will be a productive platform to enhance awareness and collaboration from every stakeholder towards a greener and more resilient future. Thank you. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Minister Monoarfa, thank you very much for your insights today. Thank you to all of our esteemed speakers, Mr. Hassan, Dr. Moya, Minister Monoarfa, for sharing your thoughts with us. But we have no time to spare. This is the Decade of Action, and I am going to move straight on to our panel. Thank you very much to all of our panelists. We have with us today Dr. Amy Jadasimi, the CEO of Lagos Deep Offshore Logistics Base, Morten Lehman, the CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer of the Global Fashion Agenda, Christophe Mackay, the Senior Executive Vice President of Veolia Asia, and Ayaan Zainab Adam, Senior Director of the Africa Finance Corporation. We're going to hear about 3 solution areas and 1 investor perspective. We're hopefully going to have time to address 2 questions, but that means you've all got to keep your points pretty brief. It's that overview that we're giving everybody that's so important. And our first question, I'm going to ask you to share 1 top lesson from your experience implementing a circular economy business model. Amy, if I could ask you to go first, and hopefully you're going to give us a sort of industrial perspective of that. 1 top lesson you can share for us, please.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be part of this P4G summit. Ladol Free Zone is a unique facility because it's a free zone that was built out of a disused swamp. And over the last 20 years, we've transformed it from this disused area into a fully integrated logistics space. It took a lot longer than we thought it would, but one of the key advantages of facilities like Ladol is that you are able to create a new ecosystem. And by doing that, you can create a lot of value as the developer of the zone and for the tenants in the zone. So I think one of the key takeaways I want to share is that the industrialization of Africa using the blueprint that's been created by Ladol in partnership with P4G, which creates special economic zones that are industrial and sustainable, is possible, it is profitable, and it is the preferable way to industrialize across the entire continent of Africa.
Thank you so much. Just converting the wasteland into a usable space sounds like circular economy to me, let alone making it a sustainable zone once it's in action, in practice. Thank you for sharing that with us. Morten, I'm going to move to you now. I'm imagining you're going to share something with us on the textile space. 1 top lesson from your experience implementing circular economy business models.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. And as you said, this is a huge business opportunity for our industry. But how do we then close this loop? And our experience is that we need a commercial driver. So it is really to set up those commercial circular collaborations that will drive this. We see today that up to 40% of all materials in the production setup actually is waste. So you can imagine in a country like Bangladesh that imports all their materials, if you can turn their waste into new materials, it's a huge gain for the country. It's a huge gain for the world. Instead of not using virgin materials, it's a win-win situation. So that is really our key lessons, is how do we make that loop closed and how do we engage all the local players? And that is the key learning in Bangladesh. How do you work with the existing informal sector and include them into that circle so they can also be the benefiters of this system? And how can you make sure that waste is turned into a new valuable resource?
Morten, thank you so much. I'm also really thrilled you introduced the idea of the informal worker, because equity as we approach these issues and making sure there's full inclusion is so important for us to keep reminding ourselves about. Thank you for that. Christophe, I'm going to move across to you. One lesson, please, from your experience at Veolia in implementing circular economy.
Thank you very much, Kevin. So in the past decade, where a traditional linear model began to transit to a circular model that consumed less resources, Veolia translated its vision resourcing the world into various key offers, including the material recycling key offer, among which plastic recycling is gaining a lot of momentum. In Asia, together with growing motivation from government, private sector, leading global brands, Veolia offers integrated solutions along the value chain, ranging from a sorting and recycling facility for PP, supplied to a major car OEM in Korea, to the recent commissioning of a food-grade rPET bottle recycling plant in Surabaya. 3RI is another pioneer initiative in circular economy business model that has been launched in 2019 together with Danone, Nestle, Tetra Pak, in partnership with consultants like Vera. This RRR initiative creates a market-based crediting mechanism which directs, one, to the corporate funding through measurable credits for new or even scale-up plastic waste collection and recycling activities. Two, action to reduce total plastic use within their value chain. These credits are underpinned by Vera plastic waste reduction standards, which will enable the robust and consistent measurement and reporting of projects that reduce additional kg of plastic waste in a transparent and socially inclusive way. Thanks to the plastic credit financing, the collection, the processing, and the unuse of neglected plastic waste, such as multi-layered packaging, can be ensured even in territories where they don't have an end market value. We believe that the 3RI initiative will be a powerful complementary alternative tool to the EPA system, to the tax policy, which are all helping corporate to reach a zero plastic waste commitments.
Christophe, thank you so much. We've heard about the industrial side. We've heard from Morten using textiles about and talking about employees. Christophe, you've introduced us to the downstream end with using plastics as an example. None of this can happen without investment. I'm going to hand over now to Ayaan Zainab Adam. Ayaan, please tell us your one lesson learned implementing circular economy from a finance investment perspective.
Thank you very much, Kevin Moss. I think, as you all know, AFC today is an $8 billion investment house, and our main objective is to build Africa's infrastructure. I think one of the key lessons that we have learned is that a significant amount of infrastructure still needs to be built in Africa, of which the bulk of it is in the power sector, transport, and logistics. In the context of COVID-19, what we have seen is that the disruption in the supply chain has necessitated that we look at localizing manufacturing. And For us, this means that we would save significant amount of waste that happens in terms of the exporting of the raw materials from Africa into the destination. Let me be more specific and related to the circular economy. For example, in the context of Africa, we have 70% of cocoa is produced in Africa. We only extract 6% of the value. A lot of it is wasted, and there is a huge amount of cost and emissions that go along the way. The fact that we could now look at local production, sustainable energy in the production process, and design these right projects that are actually going to save and increase the value capture for African economies means that there is economic development, there is savings in every way in terms of emissions, but all these projects have to be developed. And AFC has unique project development up to project finance house. So we are involved in conceptualizing and designing these right projects. And that we have been very fortunate to start discussions with P4G to see how we can basically mobilize institutional capital to come into Africa so that we can translate a lot of these development efforts into real projects that are financeable and bankable. Thank you.
Ayan, thank you so much. We have time for one more quick round. So I'm going to go around our panel in the same order and ask you for one thought on how P4G either is or can help you scale your solution and bring it, make it more widespread around the world. So in the same order, Dr. Jadasimi first, one idea for how P4G can help you or has helped you scale your solution.
So industrialization and sustainability go hand in hand because exactly as Morten said, sustainable solutions are in the medium to long term the most profitable solutions, but we're not seeing widespread adoption. That's because the key missing ingredient is local implementation. We need local private sector companies like Ladol, we need local entrepreneurs, and those local companies need to be financed, they need to be enabled through the right regulatory environment, and they need the right international partners. P4G has been really successful in focusing on local implementation by partnering local indigenous private companies like Ladol with international partners. Our Sustainable Industrial Master Plan put together with NIRAS, a Danish engineering company, and Savo, a British advisory company, and P4G is helping us locally in Nigeria, but also across the continent in Kenya and Ethiopia to replicate that blueprint. So we need organizations like P4G to bridge the gap that still exists between the international community's support, whether it be financial or technological, and local private companies who are necessary to achieving the kind of industrialization, sustainability, SDG attainment that we must achieve in Africa for peace and prosperity in the world.
Amy, thank you so much. I really appreciate you bringing out this local, regional perspective of the role. I'm going to move along. Morten, please. One example of how P4G has or could help you spread your solution.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with what Amy said. So closing the loop on fashion, on our economy, is really a systemic issue. So the focus right now on creating the business models and making sure that we facilitate that brands, manufacturers, and recyclers work together is super important. But this alone is not sufficient. And there is a reason why we haven't closed the loop on fashion. We need the right incentives to be in place. So what I mean by that is we really need an enabling environment, such as supportive policy, access to investment. And that is what we are hoping for, that P4G can support us in even more. And we have an upcoming policy event on June 16th. And there we will actually be discussing what are the policy gaps and opportunities for circularity in Bangladesh and how it ties together with, for example, European policy. And then we will also be having an investor meeting later this year. So that is where we need collaboration with all the players and also with P4G in terms of engaging all of these stakeholders.
Morten, thank you so much. So there is what you can do locally or what a particular business can do, but there's also the importance of creating an enabling environment through policy that creates the right incentives to really scale a circular economy. Thank you for that. Christophe, P4G, what can P4G to help you and Veolia do to scale your solutions?
I will say in short a lot, but as a longer reply, I will say that, Veolia is operating today 32 plastic recycling plants all over the world with a lot of customers, more than 100, including brand owners like Nestlé, Danone. So we are very pleased to see more and more customers starting to collaborate in plastic waste reduction initiative and pledging against climate change. We notice that every participant of the zero plastic waste needs applicable tools to measure the green growth. Plastic credit market displays a unique potential to not only help the world fight against the plastic waste epidemic, but lead us in the right direction to avoid, reduce, and redesign the plastic entirely out of the system. It's clear we need more big brands to become the early adopters of the 3RI solution, to guide the way and answer the call to truly empower the plastic credit market, especially in countries that are not mature enough to nurture a system like an EPR. It's clear we can only solve the global plastic waste problem by working all together in order to scale up the impact, even if, of course, the responsibility of any company to start acting to make a circular economy is a reality, and even if such an action plan has a cost. So we are sure that a platform like P4G has a powerful platform on multi-stakeholders, including not only the business, but also the government, the investors, and the civil society leaders, can play and already plays an important role in facilitating the connection to the local stakeholders I mentioned earlier, to ensure that standards are developed in an inclusive way with delivery impact. So we appreciate the P4G efforts and offering us the opportunity to promote this initiative and welcome many more customers and stakeholders to this platform and initiative.
Christophe, thank you so much. And thank you also for introducing the hierarchy that I'm sure many people have heard: avoid, reduce, recycle. I actually shampooed my hair this morning with a bar of shampoo that didn't even need to come in plastic, and we must always remember that avoid is the first thing that we want to do, and also for bringing out the importance of standards and measures as well. Ayan, you get the closing words on this panel. One example from you could reinforce something somebody else has mentioned, or something you want to add of how P4G has helped you or can help you scale your solutions.
So I think I want to just change slightly the narrative on climate change. I think what we're focused on at AFC today, and where we are partnering with P4G in particular, is to look at the fact that the narrative is that Africa contributes less than 4% to global emissions. Significant impacts are happening to the African continent, in the sense that we're building infrastructure against rising sea levels, a heated environment, and that we are bearing a significant burden. So the key point is to support in mobilizing significant amount of resilience financing to offset this higher cost of today building infrastructure, building the seawalls, making industrial parks sustainable, but also build the future roads that could support significantly less flooding. The droughts are cracking significant part of the infrastructure. So we are actually embarked on an effort to raise a climate resilient fund that will also integrate sustainable energy in the Africa mix. It's very important for Africa to also continue to mine some of the resources that are involved in expediting the mobility. We have significant amount of resources that are very crucial for battery, for lithium, for cobalt. So I think what we want to come in with the African narrative here. We have not heated the globe. We do need support to build resilient infrastructure that is affordable, that could still attract significant amount of capital once we can offset some of the impacts of climate costs. And this is a very important area that we're partnering with P4G and hope to mobilize more financing in this particular area. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing that to us. Only 4% of global emissions, but suffering probably a much larger proportion of the negative impact of climate change than 4%, and the importance of investment in resilience. Thank you for bringing that perspective into the mix. I think it's a very important one for people to hear and to be reinforced. So thank you very much to all of the speakers on our panel, Dr. Amy Jadasimi, Morten Lehmann, Christoph Mackay, and Ayaan Zainab Adam. Thank you all for bringing your perspectives to us today. We are going into the closing straight here, and Stefan Sikaz is going to join us. Stefan, the role falls to you to bring all of these threads together into 3 minutes of a consolidated position for everybody to take away with them. Stefan is the Managing Director of the Directorate of Environment and Energy at UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Stefan, thank you for your few minutes closing remarks to help us pull all these threads together.
Thank you very much for your trust in getting this extremely rich exchange that we have just lived through into actually a very, very confined space. And in advance already, apologies if I have to leave out a lot of the really interesting details. Dear colleagues and participants, I'd like to start by thanking the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea, as well as the P4G organizers, for the invitation to deliver these closing remarks of this really inspiring session on circular economy. At UNIDO, we believe that a just transition to circular economy is about unleashing the power of economic actors to reduce the use of resources, create new circular business, and green jobs. There is a clear business case for circular economy solutions, as saving resources saves costs and improves productivity and competitiveness. By making systemic transitions in more upstream areas with circular designs, reducing inefficiencies in manufacturing, distribution, and use, basically designing out waste and pollution from value chains and shifting to more responsible consumption patterns, just transition to circular economy can mitigate climate change, slow down biodiversity losses, as well as ocean and land degradation, and can also enhance the well-being of our societies. Today's session demonstrated how partnerships like those facilitated by P4G can support these goals and innovations in the fashion industry in Bangladesh, in sustainable industrial clusters in Kenya and Nigeria, the single-use plastics in the retail sector in Indonesia, and for solutions targeting plastics collection and recycling. The lessons from these initiatives is that innovative partnerships for circular economy transitions in sectors and value chains in nationally important areas is the right place to test and implement circular economy innovations. This is also why, as UNIDO, we are investing a significant amount of our own resources on switching to circular economy value chains. We do that together with the European Union by engaging global buyers and manufacturers in textile, garments, and plastic packaging value chains, and their micro, small, and medium enterprise suppliers in developing countries. Furthermore, in partnership with fashion value chain actors, including major brands and their suppliers in Egypt, Morocco, and Tunisia, scalable, market-based circular economy solutions for post-manufacturing and post-consumer waste are emerging and diverting valuable resources from going to landfills or to energy recovery. In addition to our work with P4G on a knowledge product on sustainable investment clusters, in collaboration with the World Bank and GIZ, the German Bilateral Development Cooperation Agency, we developed and issued the International Framework for Eco-Industrial Parks and a second version of that this year. Our work in 7 countries and with nearly 50 industrial parks in collaboration with the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs is helping parks to transform into eco along this framework. Finally, sustainable industrial clusters such as eco-industrial parks can become the breeding ground for market-based, innovative circular economy solutions, including through urban industry symbiosis opportunities with neighboring cities and communities, and improving competitiveness and investments that come with multiple environmental and social benefits. What is important is to adopt a whole of society and inclusive approach, facilitate partnerships as P4G is doing for circular solutions, and to ensure policy coordination to make them work. Thank you very much, and back to you, Kevin.
Stefan, thank you so much for helping close us out here after such a rich set of comments and insights from everybody. If we're going to stay within the planetary boundaries, we need to optimize our use of all resources and materials. We need to pay attention to issues of equity and justice. But we cannot wait. This is the beginning of a decade of global action, and the Alliance of Doers and the community of P4G looks forward, I know, to creating and co-investing with all of you, our speakers today, and with everybody who's listening and participating in our audience today. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you found this as inspiring as I did. Ms. Seung-hee, I'm handing back to you to guide us through to the next discussion. Thank you, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're joining at the P4G Seoul Summit Circular Economy session. So in a while, the speeches and discussions that took place today will be presented to you as a piece of painting at the drawing performance. So please stay with us until the very end and see what kind of picture our session has inspired to create. Thank you. And next, we're going to have another panel discussion on challenges and solutions for the transition towards circular economy. We're ready to deep dive into the topic. Before then, first of all, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this session. So he was voted as the 2008 National Geographic Adventurers of the Year and is one of the youngest Britons to climb Mount Everest. He was the first to travel from the North Pole to South Pole using only human and natural power. He is also an environmental scientist, a professor in the Department of Biological and Environmental Science at Dongguk University. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor James Hooper.
Good afternoon. I am deeply honored to be here and be able to be the moderator of this important session this afternoon. As an adventurer come scientist, I am deeply aware of the impact that the economy has on the environment. And so I'm really looking forward to exploring the future of the circular economy that we are going to create together with the panelists that we have with us this afternoon. So this afternoon we are operating in a hybrid format. We have some panelists which are here with us in Seoul in person and some that are joining us online. So I'd like to first of all introduce the panelists that are here together with us in Seoul. First of all, we have Mr. Na Kyung-soo, President and CEO of SK Global Chemical. We're also joined by Professor Lee Seung-hee of Gyeonggi University. With us online, we're lucky to be joined by the Vice Minister Roald Lapper, and he's Vice Minister of Infrastructure and Water Management in the Netherlands. We have Ms. Wanjira Matai, Vice President and Regional Director for Africa at the World Resources Institute. Mr. Stephen Stone, Chief of Resources and Markets at the UN Environmental Programme, and Mr. Evangelos Gidarakos, President of the International Waste Working Group. Thank you very much for joining us here this afternoon. I'm really excited to see how this discussion is going to unfold, but before we proceed any further, I'd like to present a video message from someone who would have liked to have been here today, but unfortunately wasn't able to join us in person. He manages one of the companies that uses the most plastic bottles in the world. However, it's also a company which is searching to find the most innovative solutions to reduce its plastic footprint. So let us hear from Mr. James Quincy, CEO of Coca-Cola.
Welcome to the P4G Summit. It's an honor to participate in the Circular Economy session. Collaborative, cross-section solutions are more important than ever. The Coca-Cola Company and our bottlers operate in more than 200 countries and territories, and we're committed to making a difference. Our environmental, social, and governance goals are embedded in how we operate. Water, packaging, and climate are critical priorities. Our 2030 water strategy is focused on water security. This includes where we source agricultural ingredients and touch people's lives. We are putting in place regenerative water use techniques in our operations, such as circular water use programs. We're also increasing access to water and sanitation with a focus on women and girls. We will continue to invest in replenishing water alongside other partners to support watershed health. In 2020, we returned to communities and nature 170% of the water used to manufacture our beverages. We are also working to create a circular economy for packaging through our World Without Waste initiative. This means designing recyclable packaging, using 50% recycled content, and collecting a bottle or can for every one we produce by 2030. To date, over 30 markets are using 100% recycled PET bottles for at least one brand, including 3 markets using 100% rPET for locally produced brands. We stand ready to support the Korean government as it works to set a standard for food and beverage grade recycled PET for the Korean market. As a company and as a planet, we understand the need to address the global environmental challenges. These include plastic packaging waste and greenhouse gas emissions. The goal is not a plastic-free economy. Instead, it is a circular economy in which materials can be used and reused, thereby addressing both challenges. Since packaging represents about 1/3 of our company's carbon footprint, our World Without Waste effort is critical to our climate goals. We have set a science-based target to reduce absolute emissions by 25% by 2030. We are developing advanced, plant-based packaging that requires less oil. We're lightweighting our bottles, and we're investing in local recycling programs to collect old bottles so they can become new ones. These efforts are lowering our carbon footprint one package at a time. Indeed, plastic packaging with recycled content has a lower carbon footprint compared with other packaging materials. That's why we believe plastic can be part of our future when it functions in a circular economy like PET does. Partnerships are key to solving the global challenges of water scarcity, waste, and climate change. Today's discussion will help drive actions that create a better shared future for people everywhere. Thank you.
Well, that was definitely exciting to see what such a large company is able to do and what it plans to do, operating in so many different countries, and to be able to see that it's looking to use more 100% recycled bottles in its production facilities, and indeed that the recycled plastic bottles are less carbon intensive than the virgin plastic bottles. So certainly exciting things are happening. I guess, as we can see in the video, there is a reality that a lot of plastic is used in the global economy. And since the outbreak, particularly of COVID-19, the world has seen a vast increase in the disposal of plastics, and particularly single-use plastics. I'd like to ask a question to Ms. Wanjira Matai, the Vice President of the World Resources Institute, if that's okay. Ms. Matai, what is the current situation in terms of waste generation in Africa, and particularly in Kenya? And how are you dealing with the issue?
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be at this conference. I must acknowledge that waste and the waste generation in Africa and in Kenya, certainly I can speak for, that's where I'm from, has always been an eyesore. Everywhere you go, you tend to find what seems like uncontrolled piles of waste. Add to that COVID that has just added the unprecedented amounts of waste, given owing to the fact that there's just been very little planning that has gone into what we need to do. And there's just a surge of waste around the country. But it's not always been that way. You know, I remember a time growing up where we had a recycling culture evolving. As a child, and I'm talking about 40 years ago, there were situations where you waited for someone to pick up your glass bottles, you waited for someone to pick up your tin, you waited for someone to pick up newspapers. And there was a sense of this evolving circular economy at the time. But we have a situation where we are learning about just the dangers of uncontrolled and unsustainable waste. According to UNEP, actually, at the moment, Africa has only been recycling 4%, around 4% of its waste. And this is just a far cry from the ambitions that we have for up to 50%. And the waste disposal is particularly challenging in informal settlements, you can imagine, where the delivery, the pathways for recycling are just not there. And a lot of the waste, they say, almost half of the waste we generate does not get collected. But there are rays of hope. You know, there is a situation that, and it is a situation that requires significant commitment. All parties, the waste producers, the households, commercial locations, everybody will need all hands on deck to ensure that we take control of this situation. And so that the examples exist, and we have heard several of them in the earlier sessions, but we really have to have the sort of commitment and all of society commitment to make it happen. So I mean, the answer should lie definitely, and one of the many answers, at least on the continent, in rediscovering some of the cultural linkages to circularity, because they do exist, and a lot of those will fuel and help us grow a real culture in recycling.
That was fascinating to hear about the history of your experience, and also, I guess, sad to hear that only 4% of material is currently recycled, and shows that there's a huge amount of possibility for improvement. And also, I guess, to hear about some of the unique aspects that will affect the ability to increase the amount of recycling in Africa in terms of informal settlements. So thank you very much for that input. I guess leading on from that, that 4% and the need to increase it, many experts claim that being able to increase the amount of recycling that we do and the reuse of waste as a resource would also contribute to the reduction of carbon emissions. And an increasing number of countries, as we know, including Korea, have pledged to become carbon neutral in the coming decades. So last November, UNEP's International Resource Panel released a report which highlighted the importance of improving resource use efficiency to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Stone. In what ways can a circular economy contribute to achieving carbon neutrality?
Thanks very much, James. It's great to be part of your panel and great to be hearing from Wanjari as well. Yeah, it's a huge part of our pathway to carbon neutrality. We can't get there without circularity and the circular economy. Just to give you an idea, the amount of throughput of raw materials every year is on the order of 100 billion metric tons of raw materials extracted and processed, which has a cumulative footprint of about half of all carbon emissions, And the amazing thing, as my colleagues were saying, very little of that is actually cycled back into the economy. Some of it, of course, goes into buildings, and that's our infrastructure stock. A lot of it goes straight into the atmosphere in terms of emissions, and other parts go into landfills or into the ocean. So circularity has a huge role to play. And I was also listening to Stefan Zikars closing up the last session from UNIDO. The value chain approach has a lot to offer, because by zooming in on those parts of the economy that drive material consumption, we can actually reduce it. So buildings and construction, food systems, huge part of our carbon emissions and our material flow, transportation, textiles, plastics. These are areas where we have huge opportunities to reduce our resource use, our resource consumption, and reduce our carbon emission. One last thing I would say, James, is that, you know, with the green recovery efforts like those announced by the Republic of Korea, Europe, many other countries, this is a great time to rethink how we invest in the circular economy. $16 trillion worth of announced stimulus spending. We need to make it green. Thanks. Back over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Wow, those are huge numbers, 100 billion metric tons of new material put into the global economy every year, and being responsible for 50% of global carbon emissions. That is obviously you know, a huge potential gain if we're able to figure out how to implement the circular economy well. It would be great to discuss the commonalities between these three important concepts that we've heard about: the circular economy, carbon neutrality, and a zero-waste society. Perhaps to discuss what the best way is to link these three concepts together to create a synergy between them. Professor Lee, would you be able to talk to us about this?
Thank you, Professor James Hooper. The commonalities of the three concepts are vision for a safe and sustainable country and planet. The circular economy is an economic system aimed at eliminating waste and maintaining sustainable use of resources that change the concept of cradle to grave to cradle to cradle. The zero waste means minimizing incineration and landfill for the purpose of preserving resources. All activities between circular economy and zero waste will contribute to carbon neutrality. The interconnection between three concepts, such as circular economy, zero waste, and carbon neutrality, can be explained by minimizing waste generation and waste treatment amount, but maximizing the efficiency of energy and resources consumption and renewable energy production. The synergy of three concepts, circular economy, zero waste, and carbon neutrality, can contribute saving our society, saving our country, saving our planet. Based on the synergy effect, we hope that all the people of the world and various stakeholders, manufacturers and consumers, NGOs and government and academia, and are working together for a safe and sustainable Earth. Thank you.
That was, I guess, a very concise answer. We were able to there see a diagram of how those three different concepts link together in terms of forming a system which each element affects the other elements in the system. But one of the other things that Professor Lee raised, which I think is very important, is the necessity for different stakeholders to work together to achieve these goals. And so we need manufacturers, consumers, NGOs, academia, and governments to be able to work together to achieve this macro vision. And I think that the role of government in terms of setting policy and the environment for change to take place is particularly important and will continue to be important in the future. So a question for Vice Minister Lepere. So in March 2020, the European Commission adopted the Circular Economy Action Plan. It's now been a year since the plan was adopted, and I'm guessing that the initial implementation of the plan must have been more difficult due to COVID-19. However, it would be great to hear from you, Vice Minister Lepere, what you feel the major accomplishments have been and what kinds of challenges and limitations you faced in the initial application of the plan.
Thank you very much, and let me say good afternoon from the Netherlands, good evening probably in Korea, and I'm honored to be joining you at this P4G conference, and the Netherlands is of course very happy to be a proud supporter of P4G. Regarding your question, I would like first of all to reiterate the points made by a few speakers already, namely the enormous importance of embracing a circular economy for the climate goals we have. Stephen indicated that 50% of all CO2 emissions are related to material extraction. So that in itself is a very important reason to embrace the circular economy. 90% of biodiversity loss is actually the result of resource extraction. So we have very, very good reasons to embrace the circular economy. And this is even a part of the economic growth and jobs it can provide for. So that is why the Netherlands has embraced it wholeheartedly, but also the European Union as a whole. And indeed, regarding your question, the European Commission presented its Circular Economy Action Plan last year. It actually consists of 35 concrete actions. You could think of a ban on single-use plastics. You could think of the mandatory use of recycled content in plastics, the improved repairability of products, as well as the necessity to take out toxic substances or substances of high concern from materials that are used in products to improve recyclability afterwards. So I could mention the other 31, but I won't do that right now. Those are just 4 examples of concrete actions that are part of that EU Circular Economy Action Plan. And it is, of course, meant to ensure that action is taken, but also to inspire and encourage other parties and participants. And you just mentioned yourself the necessity of all stakeholders to be part of this, not just governments, also indeed private sector, NGOs, academia. So also I think this is one of the main goals of the Circular Economy Action Plan of the European Union, to ensure that governments lead this, but do it together with other parties. And then in finishing, you were introduced as an adventurer, James, and it is indeed, it sounds a very big adventure to travel from the North to the South Pole, completely powered by nature. I would also like to say that the trajectory to a circular economy is also an adventure. We need to find the way to do this, but we have to do it. Failing is not an option, because if we don't do this, we can't become carbon neutral. If we don't do this, biodiversity loss will increase. And that is something we cannot accept. So it's not just a no-brainer, it's a necessity. And let's make this adventure successful together.
Vice Minister Lepere, I like your analogy there, and thank you very much for a thorough answer of the strategic plan that the EU is implementing. If it's okay, I'd like to ask you one more question. So in 2016, the Netherlands set out a government-wide program for reaching a circular economy by 2050. Would you be able to share with us a little more detail about the future of the circular economy that the Dutch government envisions?
Yes, I'll try to do so. First of all, we've set quantitative targets. So our present government has formally adopted the goal of 50% reduction in raw material use by 2030 and full circularity by 2050. And this is, I think, quite important because we have a target to work towards. To a certain extent, this is a man on the moon goal because we do not necessarily know how to exactly reach that, but it helps us to get to work, to get to do it. So what we've developed is what we call transition agendas for all important sectors, on plastics, on electronics, on other manufacturing goods, on construction and building, because that is a sector that is also very important, on biomass and food, on consumer goods. And we've drafted those transition agendas together with those other stakeholders I just mentioned. I think that is the core of our approach. And we've seen great examples. The recycling of PET bottles was just put forward at the start of this session, but also with a lot of other products, we've seen it can be done. And it helps, of course, to have the target and to have a concrete roadmap and transition agenda to achieve it. So that's the way we want to achieve it. But again, we cannot do this on our own. Many production chains are global. And it's not just one country that can do this. And Vanjira earlier said 4% of waste in Africa is recycled. On a global scale, it's only 8%. So on a global scale, we have 92% to go. We try to make that an official government goal in the Netherlands that we have to achieve, but we cannot do this on our own.
Thank you very much for that answer. It's, I was interested to hear what you were saying about implementing a plan, even if we don't necessarily know how we're going to reach the targets that are being set. The very fact of having the targets helps to inspire people to work towards finding the solutions. And I think that, as you say, that is part of the process. And just because we don't have all of the solutions right now doesn't mean that we shouldn't work towards achieving those ambitious targets. Thank you very much for detailing the steps which you're taking in the Netherlands. It'd be interesting to, I guess, hear a little bit about how that compares to Korea and the situation here in terms of the best practices, the technological developments, and the prospects that exist in the field of waste management here in Korea, and particularly including waste sorting, collection, and recycling in terms of a shift towards the circular economy here in Korea. Professor Lee, would you be able to share with us the current situation in Korea?
Okay, thank you. In order to shift to a circular economy society, the best practice of recycling should be applied to various waste, such as food waste, electrical waste, end-of-life vehicles, etc. Under the concept of 3 Rs, reduce, reuse, recycle. The best practice of sorting and collection and recycling of waste in Korea can be explained by the system of separation and collection. Under the system, 6 items, waste paper, plastic waste, glass, can, textile, and styrofoam, has been collected separate and recycled more than 70%. Recently, the recycling practice have focused on the packaging and plastic waste during Corona pandemic period. In Korea, there is a long history of developing recycling technology in the form of industry, research institute, academia, consortium for more than 30% since 1990. New G7 project and New Frontier project and global TAR project was carried out to promote the valuable and clean recycling technology on a global scale. Technical development should be sustainable because it may be an evolutionary process. It is not a revolutionary process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee. I can, I guess, personally attest to myself that the system of separation and collection in Korea for recycling is very good. And I guess one of the important things here is it's a part of society, it's part of the culture to separate your waste into different, I guess, compartments in order for it to be recycled. And so definitely Korea is very strong in that area. It also sounds like there is a particular focus linked with that on recycling specific high volume and high value materials. And perhaps this is obviously a good platform to build on towards achieving a circular economy, to start with these high volume, high value materials and expand out to the more difficult to recycle materials following that. So I guess taking that, it would be good to maybe narrow our focus a little bit onto one such material. Plastic pollution has become one of the most pressing environmental issues. And I think it would be great to hear from a company that produces and distributes plastic products, to hear their perspective and their approach to the issue. Luckily, we're joined here by Mr. Na from SK Group, which is a member of the P4G Board of Directors. And it's also the third largest company in Korea, and I've heard that recently it's become the domestic leader in terms of ESG strategy and management. And would you be able to tell us about SK's main initiatives to promote a circular economy throughout the entire life cycle, from sourcing to production to consumption and through to disposal of these products, or I guess rather than disposal, hopefully recycle?
SK그룹은 한국에서 ESG를 리딩하고 있는 회사입니다. 그리고 제가 속한 SK 글로벌 케미컬은 사실 1972년도에 한국에서 처음으로 석유를 베이스로 한 납사 크래커를 가동을 했습니다. 그리고 그동안 플라스틱을 굉장히 많이 생산을 해왔죠. 사회적으로 굉장히 유용했었으나 최근에는 환경오염의 주 원인으로 지목받고 있습니다. 그래서 저희는 제2의 탄생을 꿈꾸고 있습니다. 지금부터는 저희가 만들었던 플라스틱을 다시 순환으로 시키는 것을 저희는 목표로 하고 있습니다. 그래서 그거에 대한 좀 구체적인 두 가지 방향을 좀 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 오늘 이 자리에서는. 첫째는 계속 앞에서 연사들께서 말씀하신 것처럼 플라스틱의 리사이클 비율이 굉장히 낮습니다. 그래서 저희는 이 플라스틱 리사이클 비율을 획기적으로 증대시킬 수 있는 기술 개발에 지금 굉장히 큰 역점을 두고 있고요. 두 번째는 우리가 플라스틱 없이 또 살기는 굉장히 어렵습니다. 그래서 이 플라스틱을 사용하게 된다면 가능하면 친환경적으로 사용할 수 있고 리사이클이 가능하게 디자인하는 것, 두 가지를 큰 목표로 삼고 있습니다. 세부적인 저희 기업의 목표를 그래서 저희가 생산하는 플라스틱의 100%는 아니면 그 이상을 직간접적으로 리사이클 하도록 하겠습니다. 저희가 구체적으로 좀 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 그러면 리사이클 비율을 높이기 위해서 지금 저희가 집중하고 있는 부분은 케미컬 리사이클에 특히 집중하고 있습니다. 폐페트나 아니면 폐폴리에스터, 폐비닐, 이런 다양한 플라스틱 쓰레기를 다시 석유로 돌리는 겁니다. 그래서 다시 그 열분해를 가해서 다시 석유 자원으로 돌려서 다시 플라스틱의 원재료로 쓰는 것에 지금 저희가 기술 개발을 하고 있고 자체적인 기술 개발 및 글로벌 기술 업체와 저희가 조인을 해서 상업화를 지금 추진하고 있습니다. 깨끗한 플라스틱은 다시 사용할 수 있는 메카니컬 리사이클도 저희가 계속 관심을 가지고 있고요. 그러려면 플라스틱이 굉장히 잘 분류되고 수거되어야 됩니다. 그룹에서 갖고 있는 디지털 역량을 활용을 해서 그런 영역에서도 저희가 순환 경제에 기여를 하고자 합니다. 친환경 제품이라 하면 기능성이 유지되면서도 적은 양으로 그 기능을 유지한다든가 아니면 리사이클된 레진을 기존의 석유 레진과 섞어서 물성을 만들어낸다든가 아니면 생분해성 수지를 만든다든가 특히 중요한 거는 재활용이 가능하도록 처음부터 디자인하는 것이 굉장히 중요합니다. 그래서 저희가 그런 것을 굉장히 많은 매니팩처러나 브랜드 오너들과 지금 코워크를 하고 있고요. 이걸 통해서 저희는 플라스틱의 유용성은 유지하고 그렇지만 이게 순환 경제에서 플라스틱이 재활용되도록 하는 것을 진정성 있게 지속적으로 추진할 예정입니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Na, for that insight into what SK Global Chemical are doing in the recycling space and what they plan to do. I guess it was interesting to hear about the distinction between chemical and mechanical recycling, and I guess how those can be done separately, which I guess is important in terms of achieving the goal of recycling all plastics, which, as you said, SK is setting out to achieve recycling more plastic than it produces. That said, it's also, as you said, plastic is something which is very difficult to not use at all, and there's obviously still a need to continue to use plastic in the economy. And so I guess that puts the focus on where can we find those improvements in plastic recycling. Korea currently produces 191 kilograms of plastic waste per capita per year, but the recycling rate could definitely be improved, as Mr. Na pointed out. So I'd like to go back to you again, Professor Lee, to ask what you think are the best ways to achieve a plastic-less and a zero-waste society in order to transition to a circular economy.
Thank you. And we understand that plastic waste was generated a lot in Korea. So we made a master plan of plastic waste management. There are several ways to achieve the plastic-less and zero-waste society. Among them, I'd like to emphasize two ways: technical development and partnership. Technical development is necessary to recycle various types of waste and produce alternative materials, such as bioplastic, to replace the plastic materials. That changes the concept from the cradle to grave to cradle to cradle. And in particular, recycling practice, recycling technology should be developed sustainably with a technical roadmap due to the environmental situation and conditions of the countries. Also, partnership is very important in creating zero-waste society. Partnership between stakeholders, partnership between the society in domestic, partnership between the countries around the world should be established, work together towards a circular economy society. So I like to mention that if we work alone, it is just a road. But if we work together, it can be a history. Such partnership can make a history in zero-waste society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee. I think that's a great point, that the partnerships are very important. I guess the very nature of the circular economy means that it requires all parts and all stakeholders in the economy to work together towards a common goal by the nature of it being a circular economy. So thank you very much. I think everyone can agree that the transition to a circular economy is necessary. We've heard that in terms of the carbon emissions that it produces, and we can see it in terms of the amount of waste that needs to be dealt with on an annual basis around the world. However, from a business standpoint, there also needs to be, I guess, the issue of profit considered. And so businesses need to find a profitable way to be able to work inside the circular economy. And so I'd like to ask Mr. Na again what his thoughts are on the shift to the circular economy, can it benefit companies economically? And is it possible to generate profit within that system? And if so, what are the prerequisite conditions that make it possible?
네, 기업을 하는 입장에서 이게 서스테인 하려고 하면 반드시 프로핏은 나와야 된다고 생각합니다. 그리고 저희가 그거에 대한 프리컨디션이나 아니면 상황을 한 4가지 정도로 요약을 해서 말씀을 드려보겠습니다. 첫째는 아까 탄소 발자국 얘기를 많이 말씀하셨는데 플라스틱 1톤을 생산하는 데는 약 1.3배, 1.3톤의 CO2가 발생을 합니다. 반면에 이것을 만약에 재활용을 하는 아까 말씀드렸던 케미컬 리사이클을 한다고 하면 탄소 저감 효과가 약 85%라는 발표가 유럽에서 한 연구기관에서 했었습니다. 그걸 좀 더 검증을 해봐야겠습니다만 가설적으로 한 100만 톤을 저희가 리사이클로 생산을 한다고 하면 탄소 감축이 약 110만 톤의 탄소 감축 효과가 있는 겁니다. 그래서 현재 탄소 배출권 거래 가격이 좀 변동성이 있습니다만 5불 정도로 본다고 하면 약 5천만 불 정도의 100만 톤당 이익 또는 코스트의 절감 효과가 생긴다는 겁니다. 거기서 분명히 이 비즈니스의 향후에 코스트 경쟁력 확보하거나 이익을 낼 수 있는 기회가 된다고 생각하고 있습니다. 두 번째로는 어떤 제품을 만들더라도 코스트 경쟁력 있는 제품을 만들어야 됩니다. 사실은 폐기물을 갖다가 그걸 다시 제대로 된 상품을 만들려고 하려면 굉장히 많은 과정이 걸립니다. 그리고 아까 이 교수님께서도 말씀하셨습니다만 한국에도 이러한 소규모의 열분의 업체들은 이미 존재합니다만 굉장히 소규모고 이게 배치식으로 되어 있기 때문에 코스트 경쟁력을 갖고 있지 않습니다. 거기에 저희 같은 케미칼 회사의 대기업들이 케미칼 기술을 개발을 하고 스케일업 가능한 엔지니어링 기술을 넣고 자본을 투자해서 이걸 연속식으로만 한다고 하면 분명히 코스트 경쟁력을 갖출 수 있어서 경제성도 확보할 것으로 보고 있습니다. 세 번째는 그럼에도 불구하고 마켓이 형성이 돼야 됩니다. 소비자의 행동이 굉장히 중요하죠. 우리나라 대한민국에서는 최근에 친환경 제품이 굉장히 많은 인기를 끌고 있습니다. 그리고 소비자 조사에 의하면 65%의 한국 국민들이 플라스틱 저감 제품을 프리미엄을 주고 구매하겠다는 의사를 밝히고 있습니다. 즉 브랜드 오너나 매니팩처러들이 이러한 시장에 맞게 제품을 디자인하고 판매한다면 분명히 마켓은 형성될 거라고 생각합니다. 마지막으로 또 하나 중요한 정부의 역할이 있습니다. 정부는 이 환경의 조성자 역할을 해야 됩니다. 이런 기술이라는 것이 제대로 되려고 그러면 좀 시간이 걸리기 때문에 그 기간까지 환경부나 정부에서의 어떤 지원 인센티브라든가 아니면 다양한 규제를 완화한다든가 아니면 더 많이 사용할 수 있는 새로운 정책을 만들어서 이 환경을 조성해 준다고 하면 분명히 프로핏은 생길 거고 그게 곧 서스테인한 경제 활동이 될 것으로 저는 그렇게 생각하고 활동을 하고 있습니다. 감사합니다.
So that was fantastic to hear from Mr. Na about the positive economic drivers which can contribute towards realizing the circular economy. An 85% reduction in terms of carbon emissions through chemical recycling, that's quite astonishing. But also to hear how such a big company is able to realize effective economies of scale in terms of the reuse of plastics is very encouraging. And finally, to be told that in Korea, and I think this is reflected globally, that 65% of consumers say that they would be willing and keen to purchase products which have been recycled and which have better green credentials. And so I think overall what we can take away from that is that there really is an economic sense and an economic reality to for companies to work inside a circular economic model. So one of the themes that I think we've heard from a number of panelists is the need that even with the correct institutional framework to allow the circular economy to take place, it would be difficult to achieve this without the active participation of a country's citizens or global citizens. And so this means that raising awareness and educating the public about the need to transition towards a circular economy and how they can be a part of that is really important. So it'd be great to hear more about what are the best ways to achieve this? How can we best educate the populace to make them want to be involved? And perhaps the best person to speak about this is Mr. Gidarakos. Would you be able to give us some insight into this issue?
I'd like, of course, to thank the excellent organizers for this invitation. It's a big pleasure for me to be here today with us. I think it is very important to support integrated and sustainable waste management and promotes, of course, practical and scientific development. So, and I mean some of the main goals are knowledge transfer, dissemination of information, and of course, education. And regarding the education activities and capacity building in developing countries, for example, the activities of the IWWG, regional branches in Latin America, in MENA region, and also in Southern Africa, provide important contributions. What I mean is, for example, smaller events are targeting to transport the results of the larger events in Europe. For example, conference here in Crete or in Sardinia or in Bergamo. But I like to give a clear opinion of on zero waste. This is my personally, but also from the International Waste Group. There will be no real zero waste strategy in waste management. And thus also in circular economy in the next years, in the next future. I think the handling of materials, from raw materials to products and their use, to recycling activities and final deposition, always leads to material losses, for example, emissions. So recycling also leads to the accumulation of pollutants and to a reduction in the quality of the recycling products. So in this respect, I think there will always be material and substances that have to end up in the landfill. So what is the consequence? I think consequently, the goal cannot be zero waste at the moment, but the sustainable reduction, I mean the avoidance of waste to an economically and ecologically sensible level. I feel economic and ecology have to be very, very important. For example, in the EU, in the European Union, this has been recognized by the limit of 10% of MSW to be landfilled by 2030. So thank you for the moment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gidarakos. I think, as you said, in terms of getting people on board, sometimes to approach people with realistic goals can help to make people think that they're really able to contribute to creating that change. And it's also, as you said, being able to share stories from different parts of the world to share that knowledge, to transfer that experience can be very powerful. Thank you very much. So I think as we have been speaking, we can see that all the elements, all the different stakeholders that make up the circular economy, it's important for them to work in partnership. And it's important to be able to bring them together. And by bringing them together, that's how we'll be able to realize these goals and to be able to work together towards change. But in terms of bringing together various stakeholders, the role of research institutions like the World Resources Institute and other NGOs is particularly important, I think. And so it would be good to go back to you, Ms. Matai, and to listen to your thoughts on this.
Thank you. The World Resources Institute, as you've mentioned, is a research organization, and we work at the intersection, we say, of environment and development, turning what we call big ideas into action. And the truth of the matter is circularity is really a great example of this intersection. There are a number of platforms at WRI that are concerned, or at least focused on this in particular. We have, of course, the P4G Hub, which we host, proudly engaging with partnerships around food waste reduction, clean energy investment and efficiency, and then also sustainable transportation. But we also have, the platform for accelerating the circular economy, PACE, which is one of those that we are also discussing today. The truth of the matter is we see these platforms and all platforms like them focused on reframing our assumption about growth, about sustainability, and our own view of our place in the world. I really like what Mr. Girakos has said, because it is true that there will be waste and there will be, our ambition is really to ensure that we drive towards sustainability. Now, we see P4G as a place where we can see speedy, swift, scalable, market-based solutions that can be developed and grown. And that's exactly what we need, is a global architecture that understands how to grapple with these issues, particularly in developing countries, where we really must build resilience, a more efficient use of resources, because efficiency is a very big part of this. And then, of course, sustainable business models. There's a wonderful emerging paradigm around nature-based solutions that is wonderful, because it embraces this concept of what we must change around us and around this planet, around the issue of decarbonization and certainly addressing the climate crisis. We have to produce our food and what is important for our livelihoods. We have to do that more efficiently. So our production itself needs efficiency across the board. We have to protect what we have, safeguarding what we have to ensure that we continue to push down the emissions, but also to reduce the burden on other systems that would need efficiency built into them. But even more relevant to this particular discussion is this issue of reducing waste, whether it's across the food systems, value chains, or greenhouse from product use and manufacturing. I was amazed to hear from the Coca-Cola CEO, a third of their emissions is in their packaging alone. So production and manufacturing, as well as food production, has really got to be where we address, and we heard 50% of global gas greenhouse emissions come from there. And then I think the important one is to restore. So this has to be an entire all systems approach, so that the pressure is not only on the reduction. So that's a little bit about what we do. We've heard about P4G and also about PACE, but those are two platforms that WRI is really proud to host that are part of the work we do.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matai. I thought that was an excellent summary of what we've spoken about so far, and to tie together the idea of having a global architecture, a global cooperation, but also the need to find the local market-based solutions which allow this to operate sustainably, and finally, as you mentioned, to find inspiration in nature for alternative ways of achieving these goals. So thank you very much. That was a wonderful summary. Saved me a job. So now we've looked at this fundamental concept of the circular economy, and we've discussed ways that we can promote it and share it with the public. It'd be good to talk about what tangible achievements there have been so far and what plans there are now for the future. And so for this, I think I'd like to go back and ask Mr. Na, from your standpoint, as businesses function as the linchpin, as the center point of the circular economy, what role do you think that businesses should play in achieving the circular economy as we move forward?
P4G처럼 파트너링을 통해서 해결해야 된다는 것은 모든 분들이 다 동의하는 것 같습니다. 그래서 절대 혼자 할 수 있는 일이 아니고, 그래서 저희는 사실 2019년에 이미 친환경 패키징 포럼이라는 것을 열었고, 올해가 이제 3회째를 맞이할 겁니다. 거기서 저희가 하려고 했던 거는 저희 같은 민간 기업, 정부, 학계가 모여서 어떻게 하면 포장재를 줄일 것인가에 대한 논의의 자리를 가지고 있습니다. 우선 그 친환경 패키징 포럼에서 논의하면서 저희가 느끼는 것은 이미 글로벌리 굉장히 많은 유럽이나 미국 쪽에서도 유사한 여러 가지 얼라이언스들이 존재하는 것으로 알고 있습니다. 그래서 저희는 한국에서 먼저 이 부분을 잘 세팅을 한다고 하면 우선은 아시아 지역으로 좀 확대를 해 나가고, 글로벌에서 이미 많은 경험을 가지고 계신 오늘 참여자분들이나 아니면 기업들로부터의 이 정보를 쉐어하면서 좀 더 앞으로 나갈까 하는 생각을 가지고 있습니다. 또 하나 이제 저희 비즈니스 하는 사람으로서 특히 화학 회사로서의 역할이 또 하나 중요한 게 있다고 저는 생각을 합니다. 여지껏 플라스틱은 계속 리니어 경제였었죠. 순환되지 않고 버려지는 것이었는데, 이 케미칼 회사들이 이것을 커넥터 역할을 할 수 있다고 저는 생각을 합니다. 즉, 맨 처음에 제품을 만들 때부터, 레진을 만들 때부터 리사이클이 용이하도록 고려해서 만들고, 중간에 있는 밸류체인에 있는 다양한 플레이, 컨버터나 브랜드 오너나 리테일러들에게 저희들이 갖고 있는 솔루션을 제공하고, 궁극적으로는 맨 마지막에 버려지는 폐플라스틱을 다시 순환시키는 쪽에서 이 서큘러 이코노미의 커넥터 역할을 케미칼 회사들이 또한 할 수 있는 영역이라고 생각합니다. 그 역할을 저희가 충분히 다 할 것이고요. 마지막으로 교육을 말씀하셨는데, 교육이라는 부분들은 여러 가지 행동으로 보여줘야 된다고 생각합니다. 지금 우리나라 대한민국 같은 경우는 환경부에서 고고 챌린지라는 각 회사별로 어떻게 플라스틱을 줄일 것인지에 대한 부분을 약속하고 실행하는 행동을 하고 있습니다. 저희도 이미 거기에 참여를 했었고, 저 개인적으로도 다양한 친환경 액티비티를 하고 있습니다. 그런 회사 차원에서도 다양한 액티비티를 함으로 인해서 이런 기업들이 어떤 행동을 보여줌으로 인해서 사회가 변할 수 있다고 생각합니다. 이런 활동을 통해서 순환 경제가 완성될 수 있도록 최선을 다하도록 하겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다.
Thank you. So I guess one of the points to take away there, as Mr. Na said, is that such large companies like SK, Global Chemical, even though they're so large, they can't operate alone, and they need to work together in partnerships to find ongoing solutions. And so we heard a little bit about how they have worked together with packagers to try and find solutions together to solve packaging issues, but also the role potentially that the chemical industry in general can play in terms of connecting the value chain to be able to take resources that would have previously been waste and turn them back into the resource which then manufacturers can use, which is, I guess, unique to the chemical industry for certain materials. And finally, also the role that large companies can play in terms of their ability to provide education programs for the citizenry. So I think that, that was, I guess, really interesting to hear how larger companies can operate in terms of achieving the circular economy goal moving forward. So moving on from that, I think it would be good to ask another question to Vice Minister Lapierre. So as we promote the participation from different stakeholders, so including the government, including the private sector, civil society, and so on, we need to be able to accelerate the transition to the circular economy, and we need to do this at the international level. So it'd be interesting to hear from you, Vice Minister, how the Netherlands pursues a multi-stakeholder approach, bringing these different players together to be able to achieve these goals.
Yes, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to go into that. And let me here build upon what Mrs. Matai has already said on the platform for the acceleration of the circular economy, which is hosted by WRI, by the World Resources Institute. This is, I think, a prime example of a platform that brings together governments, private sector and other stakeholders to indeed do exactly what you were just referring to, namely ensuring that we translate our goals into action. And the action plan of the Platform for the Acceleration of the Circular Economy does contain concrete actions on electronics, on plastics, on textiles. Let's not forget textiles. They emit more CO2 than airlines and the maritime sector together. So that are, I think, examples of clear platforms that are meant to really achieve practical results. And then in addition to that, I think the point that Mr. Gidarakos referred to, that it is very important to include knowledge and to include the academic community to ensure that we also include innovations that are being developed. I think this is something that is important. Let me give a very practical example of this. A lot of metals that are in use at present are contaminated by cadmium, by chrome-6, by zinc. And until very recently, we were actually not able to really recycle that metal that contained contaminated metal in a proper way. And through a very close cooperation with academics and research, we have now opened the first factory in the Netherlands that can indeed completely recycle those products without maintaining the toxic element of it. It's being taken out. And this, I think, is a prime example of setting a goal, because we want all metals to be recyclable. But if they're contaminated, you need the highest level of knowledge to be able to ensure that you can do that in a safe way. And that's what we have to achieve in several of those chains. And I'm proud that we can work together with that, because that is often bigger than one country or one university. You really need coalitions to do that.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister Lepere. That was a fantastic example to, I guess, illustrate why it's important to involve all the different stakeholders and yeah, to show setting that goal, bringing in different people, in this case, academics, to help solve a specific problem which allows more metals to be recycled in a clean and non-toxic way. So I think that's a really key message and very good illustration of that. I think moving that a little bit broader, we also know that UNEP has been taking various initiatives which have been centered around Europe to promote the circular economy. Would it be possible to ask you, Mr. Stone, can you tell us why international cooperation is necessary for the circular economy, why this cross-border cooperation is important, and describe notable achievements of UNEP in stimulating that international cooperation?
Thanks very much, James. It's a great question. We work across the board because we are an international organization supported by countries around the world. And there's been some very interesting movements on plastics, single-use plastics, in resource governance more broadly. And certainly on circularity, we're seeing a lot of leadership from Europe, but not exclusively from Europe. When I think of the circular economy action plan in Europe, that's one thing. But then we're also seeing in Africa, an Africa Circular Economy Alliance, in Latin America, a coalition for circular economy. And these are ground up movements, and perhaps Wanjira, you know of these things, are involved with these things as well. So it is very much a broad-based movement, sort of an all hands on deck, I think you mentioned before. The other thing I want to say is that we have a lot of instruments at our disposal to move the circular economy forward. And Korea is actually a leader in some of these. One of them is sustainable public procurement. Here is 15 to 20% of global GDP being spent every year on products and services. Now, the government has a huge impact on demand for those products and services. So this is one area that we support through the One Planet Network with countries around the world and through these alliances, including, by the way, Netherlands. And I'm sure the Vice Minister is aware of their activities around the Sustainable Public Procurement Program of the One Planet Network. So a lot of really good partnerships that are moving the needle forward in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so I think as you said, the work that UNEP is doing, I guess, as an international organization in terms of helping different countries link together, but also in terms of helping and advising on sustainable procurement is obviously an important role that an international organization like UNEP can play, being that linker and providing, I guess, that knowledge base. I think this is probably a good time to talk about the platform for accelerating the circular economy, PACE, that Ms. Matai mentioned earlier. We know that the WRI launched it in 2018, but it would be good to hear about PACE in a little bit more detail from you, Ms. Matai, maybe about its accomplishments and whether there's any possibility of a collaboration with P4G going forward, and if so, what that might look like.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure my colleagues also have something to say about that. The wonderful thing is that these are partnerships that are success stories for so many others, but growing the PACE community by doubling of the leadership group to nearly 100 public, private, and civil society leaders that represent all continents advancing this circularity agenda is one of the greatest, I would say, achievements. You know, we've doubled the knowledge partners who've basically thought leaders in this sector. There's also the action agenda in 2021 that was launched, and that too is one of the great success stories, I would say. It's setting the direction, a collaboration of over 100 institutions in PACE that are looking at different sectors of value chains across food, textiles, as I said, plastics, electronics, the whole lot. And I think 50 calls to action along with the global community to align essentially these system changes. There's a real coalescing, I think, and a consensus around this. And I think the private sector leading the way is an incredibly good sign. We've also seen an increase in the size and breadth of the project portfolio itself. So looking at scalable actions that are driving circularity. And that's also very inspiring. I would say, you know, those are some of the good ones. And I would, you know, there are many ways to collaborate with P4G and PACE. You know, definitely PACE could inform P4G's circularity agenda and how we move forward, because that is exactly what it's about. And joining PACE and the fact that so many of the panelists here actually demonstrates that both of those platforms are connected and that they really do work together. There's a lot to be done, and there's a lot of policy work to be done as well, and the alignments that we've had today. But really the biggest challenge is that we work together and we collaborate.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Matai. It sounds like PACE has been very important in linking different projects together and also different stakeholders together. So I think that it sounds to me a similar role to what UNEP is providing in terms of those linkages across different areas. And I think that's a really valuable point in connecting those different stakeholders. So moving back to UNEP, in terms of supporting developing nations, which obviously UNEP has also been focusing on, what are some of UNEP's efforts? Would you be able to describe them, Mr. Stone, to provide sufficient knowledge and technology and information, as well as funds, to developing countries to help their transition also to a circular economy?
It's a fascinating discussion that we're having, and I'm learning a lot, both from the colleagues in Korea as well as internationally. From UNEP's point of view, our ambition is around knowledge. It's around knowledge and science. And how can we bring this knowledge in a very practical way to countries that are grappling with the transition that the Vice Minister spoke of? One of the tools that we've developed is called a hotspots analysis tool. You can Google it at SCP HAT, hotspotsanalysistool.org. And it has time series data on 150 countries over 25 years, looking at their carbon, water, nature, toxicity profiles in each sector of the economy. This is a very powerful planning device for those countries that want to shift away from those parts of the economy that might be creating legacy issues, risks, and liabilities, to growth parts of the industry as well. So deepening our knowledge around how we create more value without creating risks and liabilities. The other thing that I would say is on the value chain issue, UNEP with its partners is doing a lot of work to increase understanding around the value chains and make this available. So for example, in Nigeria, we're doing a lot of work on extended producer responsibility and also electronics waste. Believe it or not, a lot of the world's electronic waste goes to Nigeria. And so how do we work with those countries to deal with the flow as it's arriving, but also deal with the countries that are producing the components in the first place? So overall, it's a very big challenge. I'm very pleased to be part of this panel and with countries associated with countries like the Netherlands that are taking big leadership roles in electronics, for example. And Vice Minister probably knows we'll be launching a specific initiative around ICT in the coming months. But that's our program at UNEP. Get the knowledge out there, make it practical, make it accessible, and then work with countries to put it into action. Thanks, and back to you, James.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That sounds really exciting, the hotspot tool. I think be very useful for, I guess, governments and countries, but also fascinating as individuals to go and have a look at what those legacy impacts are. Thank you very much for telling us about that, and thank you very much for very insightful discussion today. So I'd like to move from that and to continue discussing the different initiatives which are being implemented. So I'd like to ask you again, Mr. Gidarakos, how the IWWG has been carrying out different initiatives for developing countries across education, capability building, research and development, and what you feel are the most important factors for developing countries in terms of helping their transition to a circular economy and a zero-waste society.
So the IWWG is working very intensive in the topic of circular economy through the different task groups. But also we look in a different way according to materials flows. So in the task group of construction and demolition, for example, there is a question of circularity of material construction waste, which should be kept in urban areas. I think the most important aspects that should be considered regarding the implementation of the circular economy in the developing countries, I see in the evaluation or also the creation of markets for the products from recycling, as well as initiatives for the targeting avoidance of certain waste, especially for plastic packaging and products. Also, an important factor is to find benefits of synergies between different industries and, of course, developed and developing countries, like knowledge about environmental impacts of operational activities and products or over their life cycle, knowledge about economically beneficial ways to mitigate environmental impacts and respond to regulation, for example, creating new business prospects from new waste and byproducts, potential access to funding the innovation and different development activities, or creating economic value across different industrial sectors and, of course, between developed and developing countries. And last but not least, increased information sharing, cooperation, interaction between different industry sectors and developed and developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gidarakos. That was, as you say, it sounds like it's important work to be connecting the same industries between developed and developing countries to share that knowledge, but also the different needs that different industrial sectors have and the different, I guess, specific insights that they'll require. It's not one shape fits all. It needs to be applied to the different sectors, what's relevant to them. And so I think that's an important takeaway in terms of the best way to help industries in developing countries to achieve these circular economy goals. Thank you. So I think in terms of tying everything together today, which we have talked about, I think there are three major points that have come through. The first is that I think we've seen that there is an economic case for moving towards a circular economy. We know that there is both consumer demand and there are also significant savings to be made in terms of energy efficiency and carbon reduction. The second point is that through that, there will be positive side effects. So not only are there obvious benefits in terms of reducing the amount of waste that's going to landfill, but there are positive side effects on other important environmental issues, such as climate change. And I think third, perhaps the most important point, is that in order to be able to achieve this circular economy, that it's important for all the different stakeholders across government, business, and citizens and NGOs, academia, to work together, to think about these problems together, and to contribute applied and suitable solutions to meeting these sustainability goals. So it's been a wonderful discussion. Today we've had a deep discussion on ways to promote the circular economy with experts from around the globe. We'd like to say a massive thank you to the panelists and to the audience for their participation. Great exploration and accomplishments cannot be done alone. And in order to find the right passage, it will necessitate the collective wisdom and experience of a diverse range of people and stakeholders. This also applies to finding the best route to develop the circular economy. Only when we come together and share our knowledge and wisdom can we quickly move forwards to a greener future. Sharing the knowledge from a diverse range of experts is what's made this session today so enlightening. And once again, thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of it. It's been a really great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists and speakers who joined us through Zoom and also in-person speakers. Thank you very much for the insightful speeches and also answers. And especially, we would like to extend our sincere gratitude to Mr. Hooper for leading the session. Thank you once again. Today's session seems to have provided us with a clearer and more tangible road to the circular economy. While the discussion was taking place, the work of the drawing performance team has taken shape. So what would the circular economy society that we're going to make together look like? So now, the paintings will be moved up to the stage to be completed. the work representing the implementation of circular economy is now completed. And I believe something amazing is about to happen, as you can see some names on the screen. Now, names of speakers are funneled into the picture, as if all the wisdom that we had shared together today are being merged into the picture. As the black and white pictures takes on vivid color, the zero-waste society that we have envisioned comes to life. And just like the picture, we wish for the entire world to achieve circular economy through action and participation. Thank you. A road to circular economy is a journey that cannot be taken alone. From the government and the businesses to civil society and individual citizens must come together to forge a compact that will allow us to navigate the way forward. The 2021 P4G Seoul Summit Circular Economy Session. We sincerely hope that the session functioned as a meaningful platform that allowed us to share our thoughts and gave us clarity to pursue action. Now, it's your turn to bring about changes towards brighter tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit's Circular Economy Session. Once again, thank you very much for your participation, and goodbye.